All right, let's take a walk through this first argument essay that you wrote. I'm gonna, as you saw or you read, I hope, it was very difficult for me to use the AP Classroom scoring rubric to score these because they've modified the rubric for this year's exam. And I'd much rather you be writing these with that rubric in mind than worrying about the old rubric. So, I gave everybody zeros in AP Classroom on this essay and the first three that you didn't have to write. So if you opened that up or saw that and panicked and thought, oh, how did I get a zero? Relax, you probably didn't. Make sure you're looking at Progress Book to see your actual score out of 7. I put that in the comments, and then your grade out of 60. I've shared with you in the post in Google Classroom a sample response. That's what I'm actually going to show you right now. And then also some common mistakes. So you can look and see maybe someone who wrote something kind of like yours, and you could see why they didn't earn the point, and maybe that'll help you understand why you didn't. Also, I hope this video will help you see that as well. If not, you always have the opportunity in office hours to kind of follow up with this. I actually think it might be a good idea to spend those 2 hours on Thursday maybe talking about some of your FRQs. So if you didn't get all the points, you want to understand why not. If you're willing to let me share yours with everyone, then we can kind of walk through it together. I can explain where you missed the point, and then everybody could benefit from that as well. Okay. All right. So here is the question, and I hope when you encountered this one, you realized that these aren't that hard. We don't know what it's going to be on, but I'm trying to give you some hints and suggestions as to what these might look like. I think they're very manageable, and I was very encouraged by how many of you did get all 7 points on this. I think we can do that, or we can come really close. Let's not give away any points. If you at least do the bare minimum, I think you should be able to get 5 out of 7, and that too, as long as you have a good concept application score, that should put you in pretty good shape for possibly getting a 5 on this exam. So, read that opening passage that they start each of these with, and let it sink in a bit. I've kind of been telling you that you have 25 minutes to write this one, and then I believe an additional 5 to upload. That should be more than enough time to write it. My sample response that you're going to look at, you'll see is actually rather short, but I did everything that is required to earn all the points. So don't be afraid to spend the first 5 minutes thinking about this question, making some notes, planning what you're going to say, and then actually writing it is rather easy. So this question is telling you that equality of opportunity is a central value in American politics. So just pause for a second and ask yourself, well, what does that mean, equality of opportunity? Okay, I mean, obviously it means that we all have the same, or the same, we have equal opportunities, but think about what that might look like. Where might we see inequality of opportunity, and where maybe throughout history have we seen those opportunities equalize? So I think if you get real meaning to that phrase, you'll be in good shape. And it says choose either Congress or the Supreme Court. Remember, there are no wrong answers here. Whether you pick Congress or the Supreme Court, you're right, as long as you can support it with evidence. And then present that argument for why your choice is most responsible for advancing this principle. Now, remember, somebody else could write a very good essay arguing that the other institution is more responsible, and they might be right too. So this really isn't about winning the argument. This is about just showing that I'm not just making this up. I'm not just picking Congress or the Supreme Court out of a hat and saying, well, I think they did more. Prove it with 2 things, okay? And you're golden. Don't equivocate. Don't say both. Don't say neither. Don't introduce, well, I think the president has done more. Stick with one. And quite honestly, I noticed this in some of yours. Don't even mention the other one. So once you've chosen, say, Congress, don't even mention the Supreme Court. There's really no reason to. I think it clouds and confuses your response, takes you away from what you're trying to prove. And the only reason we would have ever done that is in that final part where you're offering what they would call like a rebuttal, um, where you're arguing the alternative perspective. But that has been eliminated from this year's exam. So we're not doing that at all. I know that in AP Classroom, when you received the question, it was there. It said to do that as the last part. But I told you, don't do that because it's not on this year's exam. It's really just a waste of our time right now. So don't do it. There's no trick here. There's no bonus point if you do it. Just pick one, stay focused on that one. Okay, the question goes on to say that you need to use one of your pieces of evidence from one of the following documents. Now, you'll also see later down here that a second piece of evidence, the second piece of evidence, can come from one of the other foundational documents. So if you used Article 1 of the Constitution for your first piece of evidence, well, then you could take your second piece from either the 14th Amendment or Federalist 78, or it can just come from your broader knowledge of course concepts. So basically anything you know that supports this claim is fair game. What I would recommend you do is, after you've read this and you start to think, yeah, okay, what could I say that would support the argument that either Congress or, if you're choosing the Supreme Court, has done more to advance this principle. When you look at the documents, the first thing I would do is, let's say you've made up your mind, I'm going to go with Congress. Start to look at the documents, and obviously right there, if you choose Congress, you're kind of limited. It's going to be hard to use Federalist 78, but that's okay. We don't need to. We really only need to use one of these, and at most two of these. So 78 is probably off the table now. Likewise, if we use the Supreme Court, Article 1, because Article 1 deals exclusively with Congress, that's probably off the table. But Federalist 78 would be fair game for the Supreme Court, and even the 14th Amendment. Just depends on how you use it and explain it. So once you've decided which one you're going to use, or even if you haven't decided yet, start thinking about what each of these documents says that could be your evidence. Note well, these documents are not your evidence. You can't just say, well, 14th Amendment proves Congress is more responsible. You have to choose evidence from the document. Now, what that means is you basically have to show you know what these documents are about. What do they say? So something related to the document is going to be your evidence. So it might be a specific clause in the 14th Amendment, or how the 14th Amendment was applied and interpreted in a particular Supreme Court case. But again, what clause were they using? Or it could be the mere fact that Congress proposed or passed the 14th Amendment and proposed it to the states for ratification. Their role in drafting the 14th Amendment could be your evidence. But what they're looking to see is that you know what the documents are about. So Article 1, there's a lot of stuff in Article 1, but think basics. Okay, this Article 1 establishes all legislative power. The power to make laws is with Congress. That could be your evidence. Or Article 1 talks about specific enumerated powers. Maybe in their power to regulate commerce, Congress has advanced equal opportunity. If that seems far-fetched, or you're like, I don't see how, or I couldn't even tell you an example, then don't worry about it, but it's been done. The Civil Rights Act of 64 rested on the Commerce Clause in part. Maybe even if you think about Article 1 also talks about the qualifications to be elected to Congress. Think about how the House, you only need to be 25. It doesn't say anything about needing to be a natural born citizen. They're elected every 2 years directly by the people. Is that somehow speaking to an equality of opportunity that just about anybody could run for the House of Representatives? Okay, I mean, you could use something like that, but again, they want to see that you have specific knowledge of Article 1. And then finally, Federalist 78. Now, this would probably only work if we're talking about the courts, but think about the big themes of what Hamilton was saying in 78. He certainly advocated for the court having a role in our system of government, that they were to be an independent branch with a check on the other two branches. In there, he talks about the concept of judicial review. So if you can tie in the court using judicial review to maybe strike down unconstitutional acts, as long as in doing that they're protecting or promoting equality of opportunity, that would work. Okay, so judicial review is used in, say, Brown versus Board of Education. By the way, they're resting that on the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. So either one, if you're talking about Brown, the Brown case, you could tie that in with either the 14th Amendment or Federalist 78. Just don't do it twice. Okay, that would be using this really the same evidence twice. In Federal 78, he also talks about life tenure and why it's so important that the court is not worried about public opinion. So you could argue that the life tenure of judges allows them to protect equality of opportunity even when that's not popular. So even when the majority of the people want to perhaps deny someone an opportunity, the court doesn't have to worry about being voted out of office because they're kind of immune from that with life tenure. So life tenure is my evidence that I see in Federalist 78, and now I'm going to connect it and apply it to this idea of equality of opportunity. Okay, so you'll recall that you really need to do three things twice. Okay, so let me that's a little confusing. Let me walk you again through the rubric, but I think it's real simple, and I want you to kind of see this, visualize this, so you know you're doing it every time. And structure of your response is always key. Nothing's changed. You don't necessarily have to label ABC here if you don't want to, because there's no ABC in the question, but I would still do each thing in its own little mini paragraph and skip spaces. Remember, you've got to help the reader find your points, okay? As I go through and read these, and you put just everything into one jumbled mess of a paragraph, it's a lot harder for me to sort it out. And if I'm going to make a mistake, it's going to be because I don't see it clearly. And if I'm doing it, you can imagine these readers of your exam are going to do it too. And while they do their very best to try to make sure they're scoring fairly, we cannot for a moment believe that mistakes don't happen. Okay, you do your part, help them. If you have 30 seconds left, you could easily go into your document and hit the enter key a couple times to create space between different parts. Okay, but if you understand the rubric and how this is being scored, I think you'll naturally write your response in an organized, structured way. So it's a 7-point FRQ, okay, but we're going to divide this into 3 parts. The first part, call it A if you want, is your thesis or claim. 1 point is all you're getting for this. But this is going to set up everything else. This is what you're going to keep proving time and again. Remember, you cannot simply say Congress did more to advance equality of opportunity, period. While that does kind of answer the question, it doesn't develop a line of reasoning. It doesn't really say how or why you're coming to that conclusion. Anybody, I could, as I sometimes say, I could drag a kid out of the hall who's never taken government ever and throw him up against the wall and say, who's done more to advance equality of opportunity, Congress or the Supreme Court? And that kid, terrified, not knowing what's going on and who is this crazy guy who hides in his room all the time, would probably just through, quivering lips say, Congress? Should I give him the point? Is that a thesis? No. I mean, it's a multiple choice question at this point. He chose one of the two, and I already told you both choices are right. So to earn this point, you have to give some indication of what what makes Congress or the Supreme Court the better choice. This doesn't mean you're just going to like list your evidence, but it kind of does. It might not be a bad idea, as long as you don't forget, to maybe add this at the end, not write it at the end. I would still put it in the first part, first paragraph. But maybe when you start writing your essay, once you've decided what you're going to say and you decide that Congress is going to be it, you might start by saying Congress has done more to advance the principle of equality of opportunity, period. And then you might want to move on to now get into your evidence. But maybe you want to come back later and then in another sentence kind of develop why. So you got to know what you're going to say before you can actually write that. And that's why that 5 minutes of planning is important. But if my argument's going to be, as you're going to see in my sample, that it is my argument, that it's the passage of the 14th Amendment, the fact that Congress can make amendments and they use that power to create the 14th Amendment, which advances equal opportunity. So they have the power to amend, and they have the power to just make laws, and they did make laws that advance equal opportunity. The one I'm going to use is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but I've taught you recently about, you could talk about the Voting Rights Act, you could talk about the Equal Pay Act for women, or Title IX for women. So I'm basically saying their power to amend the Constitution and their power to make laws, they've used both of those powers to advance equality of opportunity. So that really would be my thesis. Congress has done more to advance the equality of opportunity by using their powers to propose amendments and to make laws to do just that, to advance equal opportunity. And it's not very specific. I'm not really mentioning the documents yet. That's okay. I'm about to develop that, but I need something here, okay? Something that shows I know what I'm talking about. So that's the first point. When you've done that, maybe you could probably do it in one sentence, but maybe it's a couple, so it's not too long and wordy. Skip space. Let the reader see that was my thesis. I just got that point. Now, I said there's 3 parts. The next part, part 2, is going to be all your first piece of evidence. So it's going to be one, probably much longer paragraph that develops your first piece of evidence. And you're going to do 3 things in that paragraph. They're not hard. Okay, I'll show you. They're pretty simple. Then when you're done with that first piece of evidence, you're going to skip more space and do it again. Now develop your second piece of evidence doing these same 3 things, and you're done. Okay, that's it. So what is it that you're doing? What are these 3 things that you're doing with your evidence? Well, first one, and each of these 3 things is going to earn you a point. Okay, so 3 points for your first piece of evidence, 3 for your second piece of evidence, plus the 1 for your thesis. There's your 7 points. First thing you're going to do is identify and describe your evidence. Okay? So that's where you're going to come up with a specific piece of evidence from one of the following documents. So tell me something about the 14th Amendment that shows that that's good evidence. Or tell me just one main idea from Federalist 78 that's going to be your evidence. Okay, so by identifying it and describing a little bit, explaining it. So in the 14th, maybe you say, well, the 14th includes the Equal Protection Clause. Or as I said earlier, Congress they passed the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal opportunity. So just the act of passing it is my evidence. Now, it's not really good writing to say my first piece of evidence is. I don't think it's a deal breaker. They're not going to punish you for that. There's other ways of wording it, but if that helps you, that's fine. Okay. Now, the second point of 3 is you have to use that evidence to support your claim. So here's where you have to tie it back to the claim. Now remember, the claim is that Congress or the Supreme Court is more responsible for advancing equality of opportunity. So make sure, the second point is where you make sure it's clear to us what Congress or the Supreme Court has to do with this. So like I said earlier, if I develop that Congress has the power to amend the Constitution and they used it in passing the 14th Amendment, I'm showing that it's not just the 14th Amendment that advanced equal opportunity, it's Congress who did when they made this amendment. Okay? It's not Article 1 that advances equality of opportunity. Okay, it doesn't. It's the fact that in Article 1, Congress is given the power to make laws, and they've used that power to make laws to advance equality of opportunity. So the key thing I think here is connecting this evidence back to Congress, not just telling us what the document says, but showing how Congress or the Supreme Court have utilized that feature of the document, whether it's a power or a concept that Hamilton talked about, like life tenure and Federalist 78, connect it back to Congress and say that they've used it to advance equal opportunity. Okay, and then finally, the third point is by now explaining, that's down here, use reasoning, logically explain why your evidence supports your claim. So here I think is where you really want to kind of keep developing this. Remember, you got to explain this to your little 3-year-old Timmy who doesn't get this at all. So maybe in your mind you're saying, well, you see, Timmy, when Congress passed the 14th Amendment, they were, putting forth these ideas of equality of opportunity. That equal protection clause that they wrote was to guarantee that all Americans would be treated the same under the law. Okay. And then maybe you want to talk about even more like an example or something more specific. Later on, yes, the court in Brown versus Board of Education, they applied this 14th Amendment to end segregation in schools. But it was Congress who wrote that amendment and gave that opportunity there. If there's no amendment, then the courts really can't do anything. It was Congress who acted to put that 14th Amendment out there. Okay. So again, you want to just kind of keep developing that and show how this is proving your thesis. I'll admit the last 2 points, using it to support your claim and then using reasoning to explain why it supports your claim, to me, that's a fine line between them. I kind of feel like you're either going to do both of those things or you're going to do neither of those things. Sometimes it feels like that. I don't see a big difference. I feel like it's almost saying the same thing twice. So I'm trying to differentiate between them when I score these. I think I'm doing it right. Like I said, I am seeing a lot of all or nothing. I think for that second point, using it, it's key to connect it back to either Congress or the court or whatever it is of the choices that you've chosen. But I think if you just keep explaining, Timmy's favorite word is why. So remember, you've told Timmy that either Congress or the Supreme Court is more responsible for advancing the principle of the equal opportunity. Now he wants to know why. And so you're telling him, well, because Congress passed the 14th Amendment. What's the 14th Amendment about? Well, it includes the Equal Protection Clause, which says that all people will be treated equally under the law. Why does that advance equal opportunity? Well, you see that clause is going to be used by the court to make sure that, for example, that African Americans aren't denied an equal educational opportunity. That's a fundamental part of equal opportunity in this country. And it was Congress who wrote that amendment and made it possible for that to happen later on. Okay, so keep talking to that 3-year-old. Short, simple sentences. Okay, hopefully that helps. So here, like I said, this document, of course, is shared with you. I'm not going to read all this to you right now. What I did was I broke down each part. So this is part 1. I know this is a little confusing and there's all these colors. But this first paragraph here is the thesis paragraph. Okay? And what I did was I highlighted in red the word Congress, and I kind of then down here in italics, but also in red, showed you that I'm clearly identifying Congress as my choice, okay? Making that very clear to the reader. I'm not saying both or neither, or anything like that. And then it's this part, the word because is a good word to use because it's going to signal to the reader, here comes their line of reasoning. And I said, because Congress has the power to propose amendments and to make federal laws, both of which Congress has used to create equal opportunities for the American people. That's my line of reasoning. That's what's going to get me this point. And so down here, I just kind of explained how I did that, or what that does to get me the point. Okay, so that's point one. Then this next paragraph, just this, is my first piece of evidence. I describe it a little bit. I use it to show and connect it back to Congress, and then I explain how that advanced equality of opportunities. So each thing I'm doing, here green, blue, and this purple color, I'm then down below kind of explaining what I've done. So you see how I earned that point. And then I'm doing it again. Here's my last paragraph. Again, just this. So I'm using another document, talking about Congress using the power to make laws to pass the Civil Rights Act. I'm describing the Civil Rights Act, showing how it guaranteed equal opportunity. I'm explaining that. And then I just, in black, here's the whole, let's see, will it fit? Almost fits on the screen here. Here's the entire essay. And I think when you look at it and you read it straight through and you see that each paragraph is broken up and I indented, make it clear, thesis point, evidence one, evidence two. I really didn't write a ton. Okay, it didn't take me that long to write this. So I do believe you'll have plenty of time, not more than 5 minutes, but when that timer starts ticking down, I'm assuming it's starting at 25. Before it gets to 20, yeah, you probably want to start writing, but not long before. Okay, use those first 5 minutes to plan your response. I probably wrote this, and I can type faster than I can write. And I still abbreviated a little bit. Like Civil Rights Act, I made CRA. I've already written out Civil Rights Act, so they know what I mean. That's fine. I typed out the word 14th, but I certainly could have used the number 14. Equal Protection Clause, I probably could have abbreviated it EPC the second time, or clause as CL. All of that's fine. But I probably spent like 10 minutes writing this. It's not going to take a lot to write and to earn all those points. If you think about the question, you know what you want to say, and you structure it properly, I think you'll be fine. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. And again, in office hours, we can talk about yours individually if that's what you'd like to do. And I'll be in touch with you again soon.